Wow. Okay, you weren't kidding about deep dives, were you? This stuff on Bannock MacBain is, well, it's a lot. We've got character sketches, personal notes, even some kind of symbolic drawings. It's like opening a treasure chest.
It is a pretty unique collection. And you're right, it's not just about who Bannock is, but how he leads. That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah, and speaking of fascinating, can we talk about this whole leading under starlight thing? I mean, that's not your average leadership motto. It's kind of poetic, don't you think?
Definitely. It suggests a certain style, doesn't it? Less about giving orders and more about
Yeah.
guiding, inspiring. But like you said, we'll need to dive into these sources to really understand it.
Exactly. So, basic info first. We're talking about the captain of the later days delivery service. 23 years old. I mean, that's young to be captaining anything, right?
It is. I'm curious, what's your initial impression? Someone incredibly capable or in way over his head?
Honestly, a little of both, which just makes it more interesting. Oh, and we can't forget this verdant deer connection mentioned in his profile. I won't lie, that little detail has me hooked already.
I can see why. It hints at a much larger story, something beyond just this one character.
Okay, so, young captain, leading under starlight, part of some mysterious group, but what kind of leader is he? You broke down his strengths and weaknesses, and that seems like a good place to start.
Absolutely. He's listed as a natural leader, charismatic, resourceful, all important for a captain, wouldn't you say?
For sure, those are take charge kind of qualities.
Exactly. But then we get to his weaknesses. Struggles with time management, tends to be too trusting, can be overprotective. Suddenly he's more human,
Yeah.
more relatable.
Definitely more complex. And makes you wonder how those weaknesses play into his leadership. Because being good at leading others doesn't mean you've got it all figured out yourself, you know?
Such a good point. It's that classic internal conflict, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you add in the whole leading under starlight thing, it almost makes you think maybe he's trying to light the way for others because he's still searching for his own path.
Whoa. Okay, yeah. I like where you're going with that. It's not just about what kind of leader he is, it's about why. But how does it actually play out with his crew?
Well, that's the beauty of these dialogue excerpts. They're like little windows into his leadership style in action. Take that scene with Devon, for instance. Devon's clearly struggling, doubting himself, and Bannock senses that.
Oh yeah, in that Bannock Devon 10.pdf file. He doesn't get impatient or critical at all. Instead of focusing on what Devon can't do, he actually says, "You're natural. Imagine what you could teach the others."
It's subtle, but powerful. He's not just giving a compliment, he's recognizing a strength and encouraging Devon to share it with the team.
Okay, so he's good at building people up. What about those tougher moments, though? Like with Kelly, after they try to save that bird. I mean, she was heartbroken.
Oh, that scene in Bannock Kelly 12.pdf just gets me every time. But look at how he responds. He doesn't dismiss her feelings or try to offer some quick fix. He just sits with her in that sadness, acknowledges her effort, and gently reminds her that they did their best.
Which, honestly, is sometimes the best a leader can do, right? Just be present with someone and their emotions, even if it's messy and uncomfortable.
It's about creating that space for vulnerability, which honestly takes a lot of strength as a leader. And that makes me even more curious about Bannock himself. What shaped him as a person?
Because that's got to influence how he leads, for sure.
Yeah, it's like we can start to understand where some of these leadership qualities and anxieties might come from.
Right. Like we've got this image of Bannock as a captain, but then Bannock MacBain.pdf paints a very different picture of his upbringing. It says here, upper middle class family, very structured. His dad was a salesman. Mom and brother were big into golf. Not exactly starship material, you know?
No, not at all. It screams attention to detail, practicality, a focus on the tangible. And yet you sense this pull towards something bigger, something more intuitive in Bannock.
So how does that happen? How does someone go from that kind of upbringing to captaining a ship, leading under starlight? What sparks that shift?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's less about a dramatic shift and more about an inherent tension. Like imagine those early influences, the emphasis on structure, maybe even a bit of rigidity.
Okay, I'm with you.
And at the same time, this innate draw towards the bigger picture, the unknown. It's not so much a rejection of his upbringing as it is this underlying current pulling him in a different direction.
Okay, so he's got these two sides to him. That makes sense, especially when you think about those anxieties you mentioned, the fear of his crew drifting apart, of losing that sense of connection.
Exactly. Because on the surface, it seems counterintuitive. This guy who's comfortable with risk, with exploring the vastness of space, is terrified of losing the people around him.
It's like that need for control, for structure that he probably got from his upbringing is now channeled into holding his crew together.
Precisely. It's almost as if, by maintaining this tight-knit group, he's holding on to some semblance of that early stability.
And suddenly, all those moments where he's taking care of his crew, like with Kelly and the bird, they take on a whole new meaning. It's not just empathy. It's this deep-seated need to keep everyone safe, connected.
And that's what makes these personal reflections so insightful. In Bannock Reflection.pds, he talks about how he sees himself as a character, his journey to becoming captain. There's even this funny anecdote about Cool Runnings that really reveals his thought process.
Wait, Cool Runnings? Like the bobsledding movie?
Yep. And it's not about the movie itself, but how he connects it to his own life, his leadership style. It shows a level of self-awareness, a willingness to analyze himself that's pretty remarkable.
So he's not just leading, he's reflecting on what it means to lead, how his own experiences and anxieties play into it.
Exactly. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. How do all these internal struggles, this complex backstory, translate into Bannock's relationships with his crew?
Because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? It's one thing to have a leadership style. It's another to see how it actually impacts the people you're leading. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the theory of leadership, but at the end of the day, it's about the people, right? How you connect with them, how you bring out their best.
Absolutely. And that's where these dialogue snippets become so powerful. We get to see Bannock's leadership in action, the nuances of how he interacts with each crew member.
Like that scene with Kenny where he's clearly holding back, a little unsure of himself. Bannock picks up on that instantly.
That's in Bannock Kenny 13.pdf, right?
Yeah.
What strikes me about that interaction is how Bannock doesn't force the issue or make Kenny feel self-conscious.
Right. It's not about being nice. It's about creating a space where someone feels safe to speak their mind, even if it's different from the leaders. And then there's Liz, who's a whole other ballgame.
Bannock Liz 11.pdf. Now, Liz is interesting because she's a natural leader herself, full of energy and ideas.
Exactly. So how does Bannock handle that dynamic? Because you can't exactly have two captains, right?
Exactly. And that's where his guidance really shines through. He recognizes Liz's strengths, or her natural charisma, and instead of trying to suppress that, he channels it.
He actually tells her, the team needs your fire, Liz, but make sure it's warming them up, not burning them down. It's like he's saying, I see your potential and I'm going to help you hone it.
And by doing so, he's not just managing a personality, he's mentoring a future leader. It's subtle, but it speaks volumes about his approach. But it's not all big pronouncements and grand gestures, is it? It's the quieter moments that often reveal the most about a leader.
Those little interactions that might not even seem significant at first glance.
Exactly, like that brief exchange with Mac in Bannock Mac14.pdf. You can tell something is weighing on Mac, but he's not ready to talk about it.
And Bannock, being so attuned to his crew, he senses that hesitation. He doesn't pry or try to force a conversation.
He simply acknowledges Mac's discomfort and creates that space, that unspoken understanding that I'm here for you when you're ready.
It's powerful, that unspoken communication. And then there's Tira. In Bannock Terra15.pdf, she's got these amazing ideas, but you can sense her hesitation to share them. It's like she's been silenced in the past, you know?
And Bannock picks up on that too. He doesn't just want her ideas, he wants her voice to be heard. He actually says, don't be afraid to shine, Tira. Your perspective matters.
So he's not just leading a team, he's creating a culture where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. It makes you wonder, what could someone like Bannock accomplish if he applied that same level of care and attention to his own goals, his own personal growth?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Because if he can inspire this level of loyalty and dedication in others, imagine the possibilities if he turned that focus inwards. And that, I think, is something worth pondering.
Because maybe leading under starlight isn't just about guiding others, but about illuminating your own path as well.
It certainly makes you think.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that very thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking those thought-provoking questions.